to have as a guest speaker Pablo Jaramillo talking about the plight of the monarch butterfly. Pablo drove something like 6 hours from Morelia to come and be with us this morning. So I think his major point is it's not just the plight of the butterflies, but a reflection on our human catastrophe too, and the ecological difficulties that face all of us. Pablo has an undergraduate degree in agriculture and animal husbandry and a doctorate in biology from the University of Western Ontario. He was a postdoctoral fellow at the Research Center for Environmental Geography from the UNAM in Morelia, Mexico, and he recently won the 2014 Pollinator Advocate Award for his work aimed at protecting the habitat of monarch butterflies in Mexico. He currently works at the Research Institute for Ecosystems and Sustainability from UNAM in Morelia. Let's welcome Pablo Jaramillo.
Can you hear me okay? Good. Good morning. Good morning. I'm so excited to be here. I'm also very excited to see so many people that sort of took the path of the monarch, traveling from North America to Mexico. That's cool. That's really cool. So what I'm going to talk about this morning is very simply, how are we involved in monarch butterfly conservation or monarch butterfly behavior or monarch butterfly life, if you will. Are we all familiar with monarch butterflies? Yes. It's an iconic insect. We know it lives in North America and various parts of the world. We also know that it migrates, yes? And that's what makes this species so unique. I don't know if you're aware of this, but it's the only species of anything, of mammals or birds or anything, that has a multi-generational migration. Yes? This means that it passes on the information from generation to generation and somehow makes it back to the same trees that their great-grandparents were at. So if you allow me, I'll tell you the biology of the species. I'll tell you the life cycle of the monarchs. So let's start with monarch butterflies in Mexico. They arrive in November, sometimes around the 1st of November, which coincides with the Day of the Dead, making it even more spiritual, making it even more interesting. This year, they arrived on the 27th of November, and that was really weird, because they usually get here earlier than that. So we're thinking maybe climate change is affecting this. We're thinking that because it's still warm in North America, they say, oh, it's time for us to wait a little bit longer. It's not ready. The forests are not ready for us yet. So they arrived on the 27th of November, and what happens is they usually arrive in big numbers. So when they get to Mexico, to these mountaintops in Michoacan in the state of Mexico, they start fluttering all over the place, trying to find the right spot in the forest so they can form their colonies. All right, so they get to Mexico, they form their colonies in November. And they stay here December, January, February, March. And right at the end of March, something triggers the reproductive cycle again. And they start mating. As soon as they mate, the females go back. The ones with the transplanted brain, they go back to the US. They go back to Texas, and they fly along the same route where they came in. And then they get to these places in southern Texas, and the only thing they need to do is they need to find milkweed plants to complete their life cycle, to lay their eggs on the milkweed, and then the first generation in the United States is born. So that generation completes the life cycle in 5 to 7 weeks. It's very fast. So the little egg is eaten by the larvae inside, and then the larvae starts eating a lot of milkweed very fast. So then they pupate, they metamorphosize, that's a difficult word for me, and then they complete their life cycle, they mate, and then they keep flying northward. Yes? And the only thing, again, they need milkweed plants and nectarine flowers. So they keep going northwards, and then generation number 2 is born. And that second generation still keeps going a little bit farther north, looking at Canada, and then generation 3 is born. So that third generation will be the parent generation of the fourth long-lived generation that comes back to Mexico. So the third generation is usually hatching sometime at the end of September, sometimes October. And for some strange reason, the reproductive cycle stops. Their sexual organs don't mature, like the other short-lived generation. And still, we haven't been able to find out why they do this. Maybe it's something with the temperature, maybe it's something with day length. But for some reason, they remain youthful for a longer period of time. Yes? So they're active, and as they're young, when they're larvae, they eat more milkweed. And they build up their fat reserves even more. And that allows them to come to Mexico. That gives them the strength to fly 4,000 kilometers from Canada and the northern US to these mountaintops in Mexico. So think about this, how magical it is to find the same butterflies, different butterflies in the same trees. So every time that I go to the sanctuaries and I go to these forests, and I go to the same site that I was in last year, oh my God, the butterflies are there. How do they manage to find the same exact trees? They've never been there, not even their parents. Not even their great-grandparents. That's the mystery. After, in the question section, maybe we can discuss this even further, because there's a few theories why this might happen. But I want to get into the second part of what I want to tell you. And this is about how are we part of the cycle with the monarchs. A take-home message that I want to share with you is, how are humans responsible for the decrease in numbers in monarch butterflies? I'm sure you guys know a lot about this. I'm sure you know and you've read a lot about monarchs. Their population is declining very quickly, very fast. What about bees? What about hummingbirds? What about bats? What's going on? Our consumption habits so aggressive that we're destroying nature, the same nature that's feeding us. What's wrong with us? Humans are not being smart. We've generated a lot of knowledge, but we're not wise. Right? What's wrong with us? It seems that we are so connected with computers. It seems that we're so into Facebook and Twitter and all these social networks, and we spend more time in that. And we're not looking back at nature. What's going on? So if you allow me to explore this area a little bit more, I would like to tell you, I'm sure most of you know this, but maybe I can share something that we have been discussing more recently. Technified agriculture in the United States has employed the use of toxic pesticides and fertilizers that come from the from the oil sector, yes? Most of the fertilizers that are used, so nitrogen-based fertilizers, all of the stuff that corn production needs a lot of, come from the oil production. So it's fossil fuels again, yes? So genetically modified organisms, talking about corn and soy, have been expanding, and technified agriculture is expanding every day because there's an ever-growing need for it. Did you know that there's more than 29 or 30 products and byproducts from corn that all of us use in our daily activities? Syrups, even in soap, there's so many detergents, things that use corn-based products for that. Did you also know that a lot of the corn that's produced in the United States is used for feeding cows? Yes? And a lot of it is also used for making fuel. How crazy is that? Are we planting corn in an agricultural area that should be used for producing food, and we're producing fuel for our cars? I think that's crazy. It seems that those areas should be used for producing healthy food for us. So by all of these excessive, the overuse of chemicals in agriculture, we have managed to destroy the ecosystem, and we have managed to change that balance because of our overuse of chemical pesticides and fertilizers. So what can we do? My question would be, okay, so in my daily life, how can I change this? So maybe, every time we go to the store, every time we go to the supermarket, we might check the label of what we're buying. Maybe it's cereal. Maybe the cereal that we buy, maybe it's Kellogg's. Sorry, I should not have said any brands. But anyway, we're buying something that comes from the US, or even if it's produced in Mexico, but we have no idea where that corn is coming from. So here's the key for the big problem with bees and monarchs. Expansion of agriculture, of specifically GMO crops, so genetically modified organisms, talking about corn. What they are doing now is with biotechnology, they're including not only one gene of another organism into the corn genome, they're introducing more than 5 and 10 genes. So that means that they're allowed to use a rotation of the toxic elements that they're applying to that crop. In other words, let's say that you use glyphosate. We know that name, we've heard it in the news and all that. It's a herbicide. It's a very strong herbicide that kills all of the other weeds except corn, because it has a gene that allows it to withstand the application of the herbicide. Yes? So what if the plants around the corn in the next year, they become resistant to glyphosate? That means that you have to change the active ingredient and you have to use something else. Yes? So because of that, all these other genes are put into place in the same genome of the corn, so the corn stands and is able to support or to resist that heavy application of toxic heavy chemicals. But what happens to the rest of the ecosystem? What happens to the flowers where the bees were feeding? They're not there anymore. So you've heard about bees disappearing, yes? There we go. Because of our over-aggressiveness, if you will, how we are doing agriculture. Agriculture is supposed to be the basis of our culture. It's supposed to be the basis of our survival, yes? We've changed it so much. Kids don't even know where food is coming from anymore. They don't know where eggs come from. They think they come from the store, yes? They think that meat comes from a tray. They don't put two and two together because they don't know anymore. As we were growing up, we realized, yes, there's a cow, and that's food, yes? There's a corn plant, and that's food. But it's because we were more in touch with what happened in nature before. Now we've isolated ourselves from nature so much that we don't even know what's going on. because all of these because corn is now being used for more industrial purposes than just for feeding us. You've heard this phrase too. There's not enough food in the world and we need to use biotechnology to improve the yields of the crops. Yes? We've heard that. And that's Monsanto's excuse, and that's Bayer's excuse, and that's all these large agricultural firm corporations that are saying, this is why we are using all these genes and all this technology to improve the crop production, yes? Hello? There's enough food. It's not distributed well. I'll give you a very quick example of this. Let's say this whole crowd is invited for a conference on trees, let's say, or birds, or butterflies, whatever. And we go to the hotel, a large hotel, a convention center, and we're invited. So there's a place for us to have coffee, and there's a place for us to have sandwiches or something. So we go, we eat a few of those, and we leave the rest behind. So the policy of the hotel is not to give that away to anybody else. And that gets put in the garbage. Yes? Maybe somebody got sick once. But don't tell me that there's not enough food. I'm sure you're familiar with this. And I was part of this experience, I'll tell you. I went to, I don't know which store it was, I think it was Loblaws in Canada. And there was a big tray, this big, full of bread. And it was perfect bread. And I checked, and it was, wow, it was going to expire in 2 days. But the corporate policy of that store was to give that, to throw that away. What? Why? It still had 2 more days. But maybe someone, sometime long ago, got sick because of eating that bread. Okay, company policy. We can't give that to our customers. There is enough food. It's not well distributed. So because of this, I'm trying to think of ways to getting all of us excited about changing our ways. It's the only responsible things to do as humans. We can't continue living like this. Maybe every time that you go to the store and you see someone buying a product, or we see somebody on the streets, maybe not here, maybe in the US, or wherever you go, maybe that's your good deed for the day. Maybe tell someone, or maybe expand this idea of, do you know where your food is coming from? Have you thought about that corn? How is that corn produced? Is it GMO corn? What's a GMO? We don't know. Most people don't know what that is. Yes? And maybe we also don't know what's doing to us, what that corn is doing to us. Did you know that a lot of the corn that's produced in the US is also exported into Mexico? And that a lot of the tortillas that we eat are made from corn that comes from the United States? How crazy is that? I don't understand. Corn evolved here. Well, Mexicans were very smart to help the corn evolve into what is now. So it was Ph.D. before, it was a grass. And with human intervention and for many years, we managed to come up with corn. And as you know, there's many types of corn. But that's not what corporate agriculture is doing. We only want a few species that are very high in yields, but we're not taking care of the variability, of the genetic variability that is very important for withstanding what's happening soon, and that's climate change, yes? We're not aware if the species that are present now will have the power to evolve quickly enough. I don't think we are going to be able to. Maybe the changes that are going to happen soon are going to be so aggressive that we might not even withstand what's going to happen. So, isn't it crazy to think that kids are unaware of how the world is going because they would rather spend more time in their iPods or Xbox playing whatever and not really thinking of what's going to happen next. So my message to all of you is, how can we, as human beings, change our ways a little bit, or at least become aware of what we're doing to stop that trend? Did you also know that Mexico is #1? Well, I think it is dropped to #2 in child obesity, yes?
Yes.
Also diabetic children. And why do you think that is? That's one thing, but it's also all of the food that is coming from the United States. Local people from Mexico are not used to that type of food. And it's addictive. Sugar is addictive, salt is addictive. You know that nice powder that they put on top of pizzas, the MSGs and all that? It becomes addictive, and it's even more aggressive, or it causes more damage in native populations. We have not been aware of those. We have not evolved with those substances long enough. Sort of like milk. More people here are lactose intolerant than the white race, yes? And that's because we have not been exposed to those agents in our food. So, what happens with the monarch butterflies, I see it as an indicator of human activity. I see it as an indicator of human expansion, human corporativism, human over-consumerism. So what do? Maybe everything we do is part of this big circle. I'm sure you've seen The Lion King, yes? The circle of life. And the monarch butterflies are trying to tell us something. Stop messing with agriculture in the way you're doing, because it's not helping other organisms. It's damaging the ecosystem in a way that we're not sure if we're going to have enough water or clean water. There's enough water. It's the same amount of water that has ever been in the planet. It's present now, except it's no longer clean. So it's going to be more expensive for us to clean that water. We're going to have to use filters. We're going to have to use all these fancy equipment, or reverse osmosis and whatever, to get water clean again. And that's because we're not taking care of what's happened before that. We're letting things to go too far. And younger generations are even less aware of this. Even less. All of you at some point in your life have been exposed to nature. And that's why you come here, because you enjoy nature. Somehow this is a wonderful place that you enjoy, and you like the plants and everything like that. But younger generations are no longer in touch, in contact with nature. They would rather have a faster car, or they would rather have a faster motorcycle, or a faster computer, and we need to get a new cell phone every month, or a new cell phone every 6 months, and we need to throw that away, and we need to get another one. So how is that affecting the monarch butterflies? I told you that the monarchs arrived on the 27th of November this year. Maybe all of our overconsumption of everything, even fossil fuels or everything, is changing the environment in such a way that the monarchs are trying to adapt. They're trying to tell us something. So, going back to an interesting thing about migration, and you might find this interesting because you also come from North America and you find this beautiful place here in Mexico. There's a theory why monarch butterflies come back to the same spots. And that is related to magnetism, yes? They seem to feel something that's present in those volcanic mountains. And that's how they orientate themselves and find the same spot. So the first thing they do is, okay, it's getting cold here. Northern Canada, Southern Canada, Northern US, getting cold, time to fly down southwards. And that's how they orientate using their compass. And they fly taking advantage of the thermoclines, all the winds and how the hot air comes up and cold air goes down, and then it creates waves, and that's how they fly down. And as soon as they find these places in the mountains, Then they go inside the forest and then find the patches where the great-grandparents were. It's very, very unique. How many of you have been to the sanctuaries? Yes? Isn't it so amazing once you get there? For me, it actually is going back to the definition of awe. It's the right definition of that word once you go there. So, if as humans we're changing the environment so much, how can we continue to promote the preservation of that phenomenon for the younger generations to look at? And it's because everything we do every day has an impact in nature. And it might be harsh for me to tell people and to keep people, pessimistic. Oh my God, we're destroying everything. What do we do? We should change our ways. We should, But I think everything we do has an impact. And sometimes, by silently doing something, maybe we get our neighbor to copy what we do. Yes? Maybe, okay, we check this cereal and we say we're not going to buy that kind anymore. We're going to replace it with granola. Locally made, maybe. Or we're going to think about, we're not going to use that detergent because it uses something from corn. Maybe. And we're going to look at labels. We're going to start looking at what we buy. We're going to start looking at our consumeristic habits. Yes? We're going to try to see how we can change the story. And we think that maybe, what will happen if I take one more styrofoam cup? Nothing, right? But I think it does. Maybe by reusing our cups, maybe if we love to eat out, and Mexico's famous for food. We love to go to the store. Maybe we go to get some atole in the morning. Oh yeah, it's so delicious, yes? But every time we buy it, it's another styrofoam cup, yes? Maybe we could take our own. And we take it back, we wash it, that's it. But did you know that styrofoam almost never disappears? And it's the preferred container for street meat, for street food. It doesn't conduct heat, you can hold it. So maybe we can take our own plate. It might sound crazy, but we can do it. So there's so many things we can do to change the story. And if we